All right, welcome everybody to the Q&A for level 1. We still got about 60 seconds here. We're just letting everybody log in here. Hope you guys are doing well. We've got a bunch of questions already, Dave.
We do?
Yeah, we do. So I've got a list here from questions that you guys submitted previously or before the Q&A, and it looks like we've got over 20 questions here. So we are going to try and knock these out as fast as we can. Just real quick on how this Zoom platform works. In the bottom of the screen, you'll see a couple places. You'll see Q&A and chat. Make sure if you've got questions, hit the Q&A part and ask your questions in there. Chat is if you want to chat amongst yourselves, but if you want to ask us a question as we're going, please hit the Q&A button, and then that'll allow you to post the question. We're going to do the best we can here in the next hour to answer as many questions as possible. So without any further, let me just see if we've got the official, we do, official 9 o'clock. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, guys, here we go. So first question, please talk more and explain reverse spine angle, linking forward and side bend. So it's like all you asked this question. So that's a great one because reverse spine angles, it's the #1 cause of lower back pain in golf.
It is a huge force, yeah.
Right. So what I think is really important is that you need to understand the normal biomechanics. So I know we just started here and you can see us, but I'm actually going to do something real quick. I'm going to share our screen. We're actually here in the 3D motion capture bay here at TPI, and that allows us to pull up a lot of data on players. And I'm going to switch over real quick to one of these. Let's go. Let's try this. Let's see if you guys can see this. Okay, so this is one of our PGA Tour players, Patrick Cantley, right? So obviously a young phenom, great player. Great example here of the angles that happen in the spine, right? Now, what you're looking at here is the thorax, right? So the green line represents thorax bend. That's tilting forward and so flexing and extending. The blue line represents side bend. So that's bending to the right, bending to the left, and the red line represents rotation. Now, what I want you to see is that if you look at the green line, okay, if you look at the green line here, right, that's flexion extension. Patrick, like most players, starts flexed. This is right here where the arrow is the start of the golf swing at address.
About 30 degrees.
He's probably about 34, 35 degrees at address there, right? Now, and actually I probably can take this right to address. Well, that's right. So we were close. Okay, 35 degrees, let's say. Now, what you want to see is that in the backswing, this is the backswing, he stays around 35 degrees, and then look what happens. All of a sudden, it starts to go away. He literally goes down to 0. In other words, he's flexed forward, but by the time he gets to the top of the backswing,
he's lost it all.
He's lost it all. He's standing straight up in the air. Now, he doesn't look like he's standing straight in the air. That's the confusing thing. And on the downswing, look what he does. He gets that flexion back.
Yep.
And he flexes back. That's the first thing I want you to see. The second thing I want you to see is side bend. So notice on side bend, he starts with a little right side bend. Most players are somewhere around 4 to 10 degrees. That's because their right hand's underneath the left hand, right?
Yep.
Now on the backswing, he goes into left side bend. And he goes to around 39, 35 degrees of left side bend. So his left shoulder goes down.
Yep.
And then as he goes on the downswing, the right shoulder goes back down. Okay? I want you to see that. Now I'm going to come back to our screen so you can see us. Still learning this platform. Okay, good. Hopefully you can see us back. Okay, so now let's get this out of the way. So basically what we just saw there, if you look at an average PGA Tour player, that was with a driver, by the way. When he flexed forward, his trunk, like we said, was around 35 degrees.
Yep.
Flexed forward, 35 to 40 degrees. In the backswing, he stood up, went to 0. And then on the downswing,
doesn't look like that.
Doesn't look like that. And then in the downswing, he went back to flexing. If you look at it from face on, he started out right side bend. Right hand was a little bit lower, right shoulder's underneath. And then from here in the backswing, he went to left side bend, top of the backswing, left shoulder's down. And then as he comes into impact, it goes right shoulder down. So literally, players are flexing, they're extending, they're side bending. There's all this motion, but if you look at a player from the side, it doesn't look like any of that's happening.
No.
That's the confusing thing about reverse spine angle, is if you look at me from face on, okay, if I take a backswing, it looks like I maintain my posture. But if I were actually to just kind of unwind, you would see I am left side bent, and I don't really have any flexion anymore. I'm standing up tall. So what happens is players replace the forward bend with side bend.
right.
So literally what they're doing is, sorry, let me do it one more time, is they will turn, they will extend, and they'll side bend. They'll turn, extend, side bend. Turn, extend, side bend. Turn, and they do this almost like a 1-to-1 ratio. If you notice, he started with about 35 degrees of forward flexion. By the time he got to the top of the backswing, he had about 35 degrees of left side bend. So for every flexion degree you lose, you gain with side bend. And that way it looks like you're maintaining your posture. It's just the angle is shifting, right?
And you know, in 2D, obviously it just looks like you're rotating around your spine. But obviously in 3D, when you go all the dimensions, it's completely different. So, you know, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and I want to just say one last thing on that. Even though that they're extending in the backswing, I think one of the worst things you can ever tell somebody to do is extend in the backswing. Because the problem with reverse spine angle is they go too far. They don't go to zero, they keep going. They extend backwards. So literally, the best players in the world, at the top of the backswing, they're standing tall and they're left side bent. Now, if they just turn, you'll see it's a normal spine angle. If they're bending backwards, if they're extending, and they left side bend, and now they turn, that's the reverse spine angle. And that's where pain happens. Because basically what they're doing is they're exaggerating. They're going into too much extension. So we always say you got to try and maintain that flexion, even though we all know it's probably zero at the time.
And Greg, you know, sometimes it happens with good players because they actually over-rotate. They just keep turning and turning, especially ladies.
That's a key point, is if you rotate over 90 degrees, your shoulders are over 90 degrees, biomechanically, rotation and extension are coupled motions. So the more you turn, if you have somebody with a 100-degree shoulder turn, they have to extend a little more. So you'll see them into like -5 or 10 degrees. That would be normal. But if you see somebody doing that with 80 degrees of rotation, that's reverse spine angle. That's a problem. Okay, Ollie, hopefully we answered your question there. Let's go to the next one. Can you mention your approach to a player with sway? Okay, so we went from reverse spine angle, now I want to talk about sway. So
the first thing we're going to do is we're going to screen them. We're going to screen the hip to make sure that they have internal hip rotation. If they don't, that's probably a big reason why they're swaying.
I'm thinking a couple things with sway. Number one, Dave just said, hip mobility, right? So can you internally rotate in the hip, right? We do that with the lower quarter rotation test.
Right.
So standing on the right leg, turning as far as you can to the right. Number two, I'm looking at stability in the trail leg. So the bridge test is, how's the king working on the right side? Single leg balance on that side, is that working? Number three, thorax rotation, spine rotation. If you can't rotate, seated trunk rotation, torso rotation, disassociation. If you can't do that, sometimes it's easier to move lateral.
That's right.
I think all of those are key. So like Dave said, first thing we do is we screen the player and see if any of those issues are there. Now, most people have one of those issues.
They do. And, you know, a couple things with the sway, so that I'll step back here again, is obviously you can get some rotation from the thigh. So if someone has tight hips, a lot of times they'll just move laterally on the backswing and then rotate. So what you really want to do is make sure they take this front pocket and turn it where the back pocket is to stop the sway. If they don't understand that, then maybe they have a restriction. So you got to decide, is it a restriction that's causing it, or do they just not know what they're doing? And some players don't. You know, we see a lot of beginning golfers that try and keep the club face square going back. They will sway because they're trying to have this width in the backswing and keep the club face square.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll attack it from a physical standpoint. So if they have any of those limitations, let me show you a little routine that I like to do. So first and foremost, I like them to work on the mobility in their hip. And let me know as we get farther away from the camera if it's hard for you to hear us. But we'll talk loud here. I'm going to sit down. Literally what I do is I have my players sit down, and we back up so you can see me here, and I have them work on this range of motion here. It's a good position to be able to isolate the hip so that they can just feel what it feels like, how tight it is, right? Yep. A lot of times when we do this, we have them stretch, they slide their heel, so it's literally, I feel like I'm sliding my heel from my body to kind of distract, and then I have them rotate back and forth, right? So that kind of warms up the hip joint, gets that little internal rotation. Then I'm going to grab some things over here, Dave.
Yep.
Okay, then I'm going to grab a couple Eric's pads. I like doing, would you grab that FMT band for me? I like doing an exercise like this. I'm going to have you come over on this side. So I like getting them down into a half kneeling position, right? Really important on the sway. You never want the right hip high. If the right hip is high, it just promotes the sway, right? So a lot of people, what you have to do is you have to use a couple Eric's pads, bring the left knee up, so that you can get the left hip slightly higher than the right hip. You don't want this. You almost want level or left hip high. And if that's still too hard for them to get their left hip high, you can use things like plyo boxes. Like here's a plyo box, and you're almost getting them into a lunge. Now for here, for sure, my left hip's higher, right? Now once you get into this position where pelvis is level, have them grab like a band, and basically what you would do is attach the band down low so you get low. I'd work on a lift. So a lift looks like this. Here's what a lift looks like, just like that. So basically all I do is I take this here and across. Now, what I want you to look at is this right leg. I know there's a lot of load here on the left leg, but look at the right leg. Swayers do this. As they do this, they do this. So what I want you to do is I want you to focus on keeping the right hip high and make sure that this knee doesn't drift out, this right hip doesn't drift up. So they stay down, down, left knee in. And now from here, work on their lift. For them, it's going to feel like a motion that they've never felt before. Right. You can even have them just do it without a band and have them turn and feel what this coil feels like. I think getting that feeling of left hip high and rotating without the leg and the hip going this way.
The other drill, Greg, is to force you this way, actually push you.
That's
so that you're fighting against it.
That's the other thing is if I kept doing this, I kept going like this, Dave could make me try and sway, and now I have to push against him to not sway, right? Because if I let him win, I'm gonna go flying this way.
You can do that standing, and you can do that like this as well.
Yep. Okay, so that's
sway.
Some of our favorite things for sway. All right, let's see. Number 3, for lower back tightness, stiffness, what are the 3 static stretches you recommend? And 3 dynamic warm-up exercises. There we go. Okay, so lower back tightness. Let's talk about that. So let me say a couple things about lower back first. First of all, in my opinion, usually lower back problems are not a lower back problem. Okay, usually they're a hip or a thoracic spine problem.
Yeah.
When those aren't working properly, the lower back kind of does the work that it's not supposed to be doing. Yeah. But S posture. S posture is a great example of lower back tightness. Yep. So let's just go through that real quick. Is if you look at somebody with S posture, remember this is a bucket of water. If you dump the water forward, it's called anterior tilt. Anybody who's stuck in anterior tilt or S posture, the lower back muscles are over-contracting, they become tight, and the hip flexors are over-contracting, they become tight. That little position there causes this reciprocal inhibition where that tight lower back knocks out the abdominals, we call it the queen, and then the tight hip flexors knock out the glutes, we call the king, which is a really bad place to be. So for that, how would I go after stretching that? I think there's a couple things that I like to do. First and foremost, I treat lower back as not just lower back, it's the back and the front. Yep. So I think of it as a lower back and a hip flexor problem. So I'd go after both of those. So for hip flexor, I'll show you, I usually start with hip flexor and then I go to spine. So I'll show you the hip flexor. Literally what I like to do with hip flexor, and I'm gonna give you a couple different angles. If I'm gonna work on my right hip flexor, okay, literally I'm gonna move it a couple different ways. I start in a half kneeling position, take the front leg out about 45 degrees, okay? My belt laser beam is still pointing straight forward, just my hips out. Now literally from this position here, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna try and dump the water backwards, okay? So look at me from this angle here, foot's turned out, I'm gonna dump the water backwards, and from here, holding the water backwards, I'm gonna slowly drift forward, and you should feel that lighting up the hip flexor. It's also stretching the lower back a little bit just to dump the water backwards. But I get that little stretch here. There are some myofascial, like Eldoa, if you've never heard of that, that's a stretching technique that you can do that really helps assist this. You can take your hands out in front of you. You can basically do one of these to help access some of the side of the hip flexor. I like doing this static stretch for up to a minute, right? And compare left versus right. Sometimes you'll feel one's tighter than the other. Now for lower back, let me show you 2 things for lower back. Would you mind laying on your back there? Sure. So Dave, lay down.
You want me which way?
Let's feet facing this way. Yep. Actually, you know what? It'd probably be better for them to see it if you lay this way. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask Brian, would you help me out here real quick? So I'm gonna have Brian here is gonna be my anchor. Stay right over here. Okay, you're gonna give this to Dave. Okay, so I can attach that band to a wall, or I can have my friend hold on to the band. Now Dave, legs are all the way out. Head's on the ground. Now what you're going to do is you're going to do a curl up. You're going to go each vertebrae one at a time. You're going to curl C1, C2, C3, and try and work your way up your entire spine trying to go touch your toes. Now what's really important when you do this curl up is you're looking to see if you can move every vertebrae one at a time. And when you come back down, you try and go one at a time too. Let's try this again. Go each vertebrae one at a time. Now, if you get to a point where you feel like 3 or 4 are coming together, like right there, does that feel like a block right there? You'd want to stay right where you feel that little block and try and knock the top block off. So you kind of do a little side to side and then come up a little bit farther and see if you can start to break those little blocks loose and keep coming up and all the way to your toes.
I got a lot of blocks.
A lot of us have a lot of blocks. But with time, literally, if you're doing this nice and slow, maybe 10 repetitions, the band's helping you, you really start to get a lot of self-awareness. I think awareness is really key on where those are tight and start to increase the flexion in your lumbar spine. Remember, lumbar spine is supposed to flex. I think that's really, really, really important. Okay. Good.
Okay.
I like it. Okay. And then last but not least, I'm going to go that in front. So now, stay right there, Dave. Stay right there. Then I like taking, from that same stretching I showed you hip flexors, there's that group Eldoa. And if you're ever interested in some of the myofascial stretching, I think they do a great job. You can look up Eldoa, E-L-D-O-A on YouTube. One of our advisory board members, Janet Alexander, is great and one of the instructors for that. Go ahead and lay on your back. I'll show you one more. Basically, you take your feet up in the air. Your feet would go against a wall. So imagine this is a wall right here. So I'll be the wall, right? So Dave's against the wall here. Now, literally what you'd want to do is you'd want your feet to be about shoulder width apart, turn the toes in. From here, you're going to take your hands up, reaching up above your head with your wrist extended. Chin is going to tuck. You tuck your chin, and you try and slide your head up the wall. And then from here, you try and drive your toes below your heels. When you drive your toes below your heels, what this does is you're kind of driving your butt down into the ground, your head up, hands up. So hands and heads are going this way, butt's going this way, heels are driving up, toes are going down, and what it does is it stretches out the lower back. You'll feel this in the posterior chain, like hamstrings. You can hold these for about a minute. Again, you can go look at these on YouTube. That's called Eldoa, L5S1. It's a great way to help separate the lower back. I think if you do those 3 exercises, hip flexor stretch, the Eldoa, L5S1,
I like that.
and then the curl up. The curl up really is the one that gives you the sensation of is it moving or not.
That's right.
That's the routine I do to get people moving their lower back. Okay? Okay. And if we're answering your question and we don't answer all of your questions, just go ahead and shoot us another question, okay? So I just see Kevin just asked a question, is it possible to overstretch a muscle, or do you know when a muscle has reached its limit? First of all, let me just say something real quick. Muscles are not the things that are tight. Okay? Yeah. Normally it's not a muscle. People think I'm going to go stretch my hamstring. You're not stretching your hamstring. It's the fascia, which is like the connective tissue that overlays the muscle, interlays the muscle. It's the connective tissue, it's ligaments, things like that tend to be the things that become tight, so it's not really the muscle.
That's why manual therapy is so important.
Manual therapy is great. That's why static stretching is great, because it helps break down some of that connective tissue. I think a lot of people are scared of static stretching. I always say, look, you want a good stretch, but you don't want to tear, yes. Right? So there's a stretch and then there's a burn. If you start feeling a burn, I back off, mm-hmm. Right? And mobility is one of those things where you just want slow repetitions. So you basically, it's something you do every morning, and then with time you're just becoming more mobile. It's not like we're going to try and get you 20 degrees right now, yep. Right? So you just kind of, if we do get you 20 degrees right now, then it probably wasn't tightness at all. It was probably more neurological, right? Type of stuff. Okay, let's see. Number 4, do you have any strategies for non-golfing TPI certified individuals to accelerate their golf knowledge other than playing a lot? Okay, so probably for our medical fitness, if you've never played golf before, obviously coming to level 1, you got a crash course on golf.
You did. I mean, I think some of the big ones are, look at golf swings. Look at golf swings on YouTube. Watch television. Start looking at different players and look at different swings. There's so many different variables out there. I even do this today when I'm watching television, is I'll watch a great player swing, and then I'll actually look for, wow, that hip looks a little tight. Maybe that's why they're doing that. And I think it's just start looking at the body that you're an expert in, and start looking how that relates to a movement. So if you see somebody that has a little bit of a sway, you'd be thinking tight hip. So you just keep going over the Big 12, keep looking at those type of things, and that's the best way to get more knowledge.
I'll tell you, speaking from that perspective, I feel like knowledge is power. Yes. Right? The more knowledge you have, the better. Like we have an advisory board member by the name of Dr. Jim Andrews, probably the best orthopedic surgeon in the United States for athletes. I actually went and visited him and watched him as he was doing orthopedic or doing meniscus surgery. Now, does that mean I'm going to do surgery on the knee? Of course not. But does it help me understand how to rehabilitate a knee better when I see what they're doing? Absolutely. Yes. Right. So I feel like, this might sound weird, but we have our level 2 classes, right? Our golf level 2 and our power level 2 classes. We go in depth into more of the biomechanics of the golf swing, understanding the golf swing. I know this is crazy. I know you can't get a major. You can't be certified at the TPI golf. You can have a minor golf certification, but if you're trying to learn more about golf, I mean, we're going to go through in golf level 2, we go through the science of launch monitors and ball flight, what makes the ball curve and turn. I think that's so important for a medical and fitness person to understand that, because it helps you build the engine better. So, if like you're a pit crew, I think it helps to understand how to drive a car. I'm not saying you're going to go teach driving a car, but I think it helps if you know how to drive a car. So on our tracks, the golf level 2 and the power 2, I think kind of go into a lot of the details. Even junior does a little bit too. If you're working more with kids, Dennis McVeigh does an incredible job of that. But who cares? No, this sounds horrible. Who cares about certification? Knowledge is what you want, right? So I'd look at those. All right, let's see. How do you work with a student with limited flexibility due to a permanent injury? That's a great question. We get this all the time. So like, let's say, hey, I want to work on the hip, but the hip has a plate in it and it doesn't move, or I've got a rod in my spine. And okay, so if you have a permanent injury and there's no way for you to increase that mobility, you have to go back to our philosophy of the body, which is the body works in an alternating pattern of stable segments connected by mobile joints. And you got to remember that the ankle's supposed to be mobile, hips mobile, T-spine's mobile, shoulders mobile, wrist is mobile, upper cervical neck. If they lose one of their mobile joints, okay, like let's say they lose their hip, there's nothing you're going to do about it. If it's a permanent injury, there's nothing you can do about the hip. But now the ankle, the above and below, the ankle and the T-spine become your priority. That's your focus. I tell these people, I'm like, listen, I draw it out on a piece of paper and I say, you lost this joint. There's nothing we can do about it. But now you have lost the right to lose the T-spine and the ankle, because if you do, it's like dominoes. Everything's going to get horrible. So we just shift our focus to above and below. That same doctor, Dr. Andrews, told me that when I was there visiting him, he was like, Greg, I love your model on mobile stable. If you're gonna tear a joint, tear one of those stable ones. It's really easy for us to make those stable again. We can put a plate or something in there. You tear those mobile ones, that's a problem. It's hard to maintain the mobility. So a lot of people do get permanent injuries in those mobility joints, and we've got to give them more range of motion above and below. I mean, that's the key. Right?
Yeah, and as a golf professional, you need to have lots of methods to teach around. So, if something's not functioning, you should know something about a different type of swing that you might be able to put on that body that takes stress off that area.
Yep. Okay, make sure we're answering all those. Good. Okay, number 6. I'm struggling to help clients improve their upper and lower body disassociation. Have you encountered any difficult examples? Yeah, well, we've encountered a lot of these. So remember, disassociation is an advanced skill, right? You have to be able to stabilize one part and then mobilize the other, right? So I always feel like that involves so many things. It's not like disassociation is one thing. If you're going to do pelvic disassociation, you have to have the stability in the upper body and then the mobility in the lower body, and then vice versa. If you're going to do upper body disassociation, you have to have the stability below and the mobility above. So the key comes into diagnosing, in my opinion, right? Yeah. So let's say pelvic rotation. Okay, let's say pelvic rotation is a problem, right? And it's disassociating. You're like, man, this is a tough case. I can't figure out what to do. Level 1, we showed you a couple of home run exercises to help, but it doesn't always help because sometimes you have to attack a different problem, right? So let's think about this. What's required to do a pelvic rotation or pelvic disassociation? Well, first and foremost, from a mobility standpoint, Dave needs to be able to mobilize right hip and left hip. So as he turns this way, or go back to the test. Okay. So as he turns his hips this way, his right hip has to internally rotate, left hip has to externally rotate, and he needs mobility in his spine. Believe it or not, the lower thoracic spine is actually creating this disassociation too. So there's spine rotation, there's hip rotation. There's even a little bit of rotation below the knee, but the primary driver here is going to be trying to see if you can rotate the pelvis, which is coming from the hips and the spine, above and below. So I always like to go and try and figure out which one is it. So literally, I would, if that's difficult, I go right into the lower quarter rotation test so I can check the hip. And yeah, so then we go into the lower quarter. If the lower quarter rotation test is okay, but the disassociation is still a problem, well, then I go check the seated trunk rotation test. Go check the spine, make sure the spine can rotate. If either of those are a problem, then I'm going to work on that mobility first. If those are good and the mobility is good, then you really do have a stability problem.
That's right.
Then we go into the stability drills. And it's the same thing if I was going to do the torso rotation test. If he's doing the torso rotation test, now that spine mobility is obviously priority, right?
That's right.
So, and how many people have thoracic mobility problems, right? Now, let me just talk about that for a second. If the thorax is limited, a lot of people immediately just go, well, I'm going to work on the spine. Well, the thorax is a lot more than the spine. You've got the rib cage. So any restrictions in the rib cage can create problems with torso rotation tests. You've got this entire sheath of fascia that surrounds the oblique abdominals. It's like a girdle. That's probably the most common restriction is oblique abdominal restrictions. And then there's the spine, right? There's even part of the shoulder that's involved here, the front of the shoulder. So I always start by looking at rib cage. How tight and pliable is the rib cage? If it's really restricted, you want to try and expand and open up the rib cage. One of the best ways to do that is with breathing and respiration exercises, trying to get them to fill up their rib cage and try and help expand with air. Oblique abdominals, I'm always feeling to see if the obliques feel tight. A lot of the open book exercises we talk about, you can go look at those in the exercise library. Trying to help open up the oblique abdominal area is incredibly important. And then obviously the spine. And we go through a lot of stuff in the spine in the live class, and the online class. But any of your lumbar lock positions where you're in the prayer position and you're working on like reach backs, open books, any of those that help focus on the T-spine versus the lumbar spine are going to help you get that disassociation. And that's what we do.
And then the other thing in terms of swing drills, Greg, is we like to combine those with some kind of hitting drills. So, if you're going to do like a stork turn where they're separating their lower body from their upper body, have them do 3 or 4 of those, and then go right into a short swing where they learn to separate their lower body.
Getting that feeling.
Trying to get the feeling into a swing.
Okay, hope that answered your question there. Okay, let's see. Number 7. What do you suggest to monitor a student's improvements in all areas of their golf game besides just their score? So how do we know if they're improving? I'll say one easy one. Hey, on our app that we give you, we've got a golf handicap. So there's a fitness handicap that kind of gives you an idea of, and by the way, I want to say something about the golf fitness handicap. Some of you might be using our pro site. If you use our pro site versus our app, it's a different fitness handicap. Right now. That will be converting, everything will be converting to the app. So if you're questioning which one we like the app because the app is using an artificial intelligence that helps us figure out which screens are actually more important. In the web-based program, our pro site on the website, every screen is equal value. Yeah. The app has got much smarter. It knows that if you fail the bridge test, it's probably more importantly than if you fail the single leg balance. Yeah. It looks at which ones affect more parts of the golf swing. So you'll see like, man, I got like a 12 handicap on the website, but the app says I'm a 22. That's because the app's smarter, right? So I like the golf fitness handicap on the app. That's how you can explain to your students that because of all the wave of artificial intelligence being able to help us identify what's more important, we're getting smarter with our golf fitness handicap. That will be matched soon, right? So we're working on that. So golf fitness handicap is one great way that looks at your overall mobility and stability. I think setting goals is really important, right? So like, goal isn't like I want to win the Masters this year, right? A goal is something that you can control and you can measure. Right. So it's like, okay, I want to create a distance wedge matrix, right? So that I want to know 12 different known numbers with my wedges. Yeah. And I'm going to do this by, February, right? Mm-hmm. So literally now by February, you can see, do you have those 12 numbers? That doesn't mean you shot the best round of your life. It just means you accomplished that goal that you can control, right? So I like setting controllable goals that you can go through, and that can be from the fitness perspective, that can be from the golf perspective, but that has nothing to do with score.
I think if you actually do the workout from the screen, like if you actually build them a session, have them go through the session and then retest them so that they can see the difference. Yeah,
that's the golf fitness. You should be able to see that.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's, I think, the obvious one there. Okay, number 8. Many kids dip their head in the downswing. Can this cause neck problems? Does it affect efficiency? Would you fix it, and how? It's coming from Glenn. So, wow, Glenn, that's we see this all the time.
Well, let me start. I mean, we've talked about this before, and that the kids generally their lower body is their power source when you're young. Your core doesn't develop, upper body doesn't develop. So a lot of times you'll see this in the downswing where they'll drop down. You even see great players doing this. What they're doing is they're loading their legs. They're pushing into the ground. And it's this push into the ground and the push back from the ground that actually fires the hips and creates hip speed. You do not want to take this away. So a lot of times, you know, when you see these kids jumping, you see them dropping, it will go away as they develop more core musculature and upper body strength. It'll stabilize their lower body. You don't want to take it away.
I'm going to tell you what so that's kind of talking downswing, jumping. If you're talking about the backswing with the head dropping, you know, this stuff, which we see all the time, to me, that's almost, I don't want to say 100%, nothing's 100%, but it's almost 100% poor club fitting.
Yeah,
right?
The clubs don't fit them.
The club is too heavy, the club is too long. Basically, the kid's telling you it's hard to even lift the club up. I would check, make sure they can maintain posture and raise the club, maintaining wrist set with the right hand and then the left hand. They should be able to do each hand individually, not both hands, and maintain posture in slow motion. If they can't, no matter what you do, they're going to drop, right? So literally, I look at weight. You know, Dennis McDade always says the 3 L's. It was light, right? Should be light. The length needs to be as short as possible and as much loft as possible, right, for young kids. And it's amazing. Most kids just take dad's old club or mom's old club, chop it down a little bit. It weighs twice what it should weigh. You know, I'm like, hey, if I give you a 20-pound driver and say take it back, guess what? You're going to dip, right? You're going to drop. And it's those poor club fitting problems that literally create the motor patterns that we have to go break as they get older, and it's really frustrating.
You mentioned one thing about neck injury. I don't think we should have to worry about that when they're young. The bigger worry for me with that is mobile devices. You know, most kids are developing poor posture because they're constantly looking.
Yeah, well, but if they are dipping, right? Yeah. So if they dip down, right, this is not usually where the injury occurs. Yeah. It's when they jump back up and the head flexes down. When the head, if your neck flexes rapidly through impact and turns, that's the easiest way to herniate a disc in your neck, right? So if I drop and then flex, so it's from this way, if I go down, my head extends, and then as I come in through impact, my head flexes. That's very vulnerable for neck injuries, right? Yeah. So again, I'm going to come back to club fitting. If you see a kid and he keeps dipping, give him just a dowel and say, take a swing. If the dipping goes away, it's club fitting. Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's see. Just making sure no other questions. Okay. Now let's go to what are the top mistakes testers make during the basic TPI assessment tests? Chris. So I would tell you, I'll tell a couple, and Dave, you can say yours. I think number one, on the deep squat, I see people, we're so much pickier on the squat than most people. I think most people on the squat let the feet stay flared out. Right? Remember, we say you can't break sagittal plane. We want everything to point forward. If you move right or left, if your knees dive in, those are all breaking sagittal plane. The most common breaking sagittal plane is the feet flaring, right? So you got to start with the feet forward, and if the foot flares out, they're failing the test. Mm-hmm. Now, that gives us what we call a false positive. In other words, the hips normally have a little bit of external rotation, maybe 5 degrees. But it's hard to tell somebody to set up at 5 degrees. Every time they do it, they'll be different. 7 degrees. So we just say make it straight. So we're making the squat harder, but that way we all speak the same language, and we never get a false negative where somebody actually, we say they passed, but they didn't really pass. Yeah. That's number one. Second part of the deep squat is, or it's the third part, is the dorsiflexion, right? When we check to see, can they get their knee in front of their toe? I see a lot of people do that and pass them, but then when we look at them from face on, they look like this, right? Yeah. We call that jousting. It's basically, I always want your femur to point over your toe and go straight forward. If your femur points in and you go in front of the toe, well, that's not dorsiflexion. You're cheating, right? So I think those are probably the two big mistakes. I also see in the lower quarter rotation, sometimes the foot is not perpendicular to the 6-iron. Yes. And they start rotated. Yep. So I think that's important. Any other ones come to your mind?
I think those are about the.
Those are my. And then don't help people.
No.
I see a lot of people trying to help people. We're trying to test you. We're not trying to help you. We'll help you after the test, right? So don't touch them if you're not supposed to touch them. Just give them the basic instructions. And I like monkey see, monkey do. Okay. Okay, let's see. Any plans for a forum for certified practitioners to share ideas, best practices from Mark? And we've had a
Facebook page where a lot of guys.
Yeah, we definitely have a Facebook page where you can do some stuff. But this is something we talked about a couple things, and I'd love to get your guys' feedback on this. We've talked about having a job forum where people can place job offers looking for a TPI certified, or if you're TPI certified and you're looking for a place, if you'd like one of those, we're thinking about adding one of those to one of our forums. And I love the idea of the forum for practitioners to share cases and stuff. And maybe maybe something could be as easy as setting up a Facebook group for this.
It could. I mean, we also have our World Golf Fitness Summit, which is a huge share. That's a great forum for people to come. So if you're not signed up for that, take a look at it in October in Orlando. That is an event that we love doing every 2 years, where we really bring the whole community together. And I think we have about 53 speakers or something this year.
And I love the feedback. Stuff like this really helps us, because stuff like this actually turns into actual steps. So that's something we'll talk to our team about. I like that idea. Can TPI be adapted for the senior player? Adrian. Well, Adrian, I just want to make it really clear that when we developed TPI in the screen, we did it for the average golfer. The average golfer is 55 to 60 years old. So what is that? Is that a senior golf? So it really, the screening is designed for a senior player. Now, if you're talking super senior, like 80 years old, there are a few considerations that need to be made. First and foremost, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I never assume they can't do it. I ask them to see if they can do it.
That's right.
The only time I don't have them do it, if they come with doctor's instructions, like I'm not allowed to squat or I'm not allowed to flex. There are some elderly patients with severe osteoporosis or osteopenia where their bones are very soft, where sometimes over-flexing can create some damage. Usually they know that. So if you ask them, do you have any severe osteoporosis, you might want to eliminate a couple of the tests. But other than that, man, the screen is designed for seniors.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've always said this. I always look at the swing, start looking at the Big 12, identifying what the problem is, and I start with the screen that most relates to that. So a lot of times you don't, we want you to do the entire screen, but on a senior player, I might just see over the top and try separation and see. So you don't have to do the whole thing. You get better at this as you go.
And then Austin, you just asked the question about this. Do you scale the screen for older population? Single leg balance with eyes closed, or overhead squat nearly impossible for my clients over 55. So first of all, I can tell you right now, I got clients that are 90 that can do a deep squat. So just because they're over 55 doesn't mean, hell, that's Dave. No, it's kidding. Right. So I think that, first of all, I give people the benefit of the doubt. I just want to know if they can squat. I don't want to assume they can't squat. The single leg balance, we always try single leg balance with their eyes open first. If they're struggling with their eyes open, of course we don't close their eyes, because they're going to only get worse, right? But if you spot them behind them, I think most people want the challenge. They want to try it. Just make it safe. You stand behind them if they close their eyes, or put them somewhere where they're not going to fall. And then the overhead deep squat, again, if they can't do it, then just skip part 1, go to part 2. If they can't do part 2, go check the ankle. I still want to know, is it ankle, knee, or hip?
And I think, we talk about this a lot, that someone might have 5 degrees of internal hip rotation, which is terrible. But with a little bit of exercise, you can get them 10, which is still terrible compared to the best players in the world, but it's double what they had. So when you take seniors, the beauty of a senior is you can actually improve their range of motion massively. Even though you may be comparing it to the best in the world, which you shouldn't do. For them, just a 5-degree increase in internal hip rotation can be huge. So don't underestimate the power of correction, especially the power of manual therapy on your senior golfers.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see.
Greg, if you want to go through the Q&A here, because
we got a couple. Looks like we got a couple coming in.
These are the people in the
here
right now.
Players. Okay, Steve. What's happening, Steve? Players fails left arm rotation, resulting in severe chicken wing. So I'm assuming you're talking about 90-90, resulting in a severe chicken wing hitting a ball. But he can make a good practice swing with the left arm rotation and no chicken winging. Explanation. So, Steve, great question. Asking about how the shoulder affects the chicken winging. In my experience, the #1 cause of chicken winging is not the shoulder, it's the lower body, right? So I always feel like the first thing I'm going to look at is, are they using the lower body properly? If the lower body is not initiating and starting the golf swing, you're going to get the over the top, the casting, the chicken wing almost all the time. Now, just because think about this, we talk about this 90-90 being really important, this external rotation, but literally, if I don't move my body as I come through, the left arm has to rotate more. If I turn my body, my lower body's turning, I really don't have to use my left arm. So the more I turn my body, the less the shoulders require.
The other thing there, Steve, too, is power. Like sometimes when we do our power testing that you learn in Power 2, if someone's upper body dominant with power, when they're not hitting a golf ball, they look good. But the minute you put a golf ball and they add power, all of a sudden they use their upper body.
So 2 things. #1, power. #2 is if they do their practice swing, it looks great. But then in their real swing, now they're early extending and they're not rotating. Well, then the left arm's not going to work properly. That's what I'd look at first. Let's see, Banya. I'm still doubting about the transition that you need to shift your weight to your left toe while keeping your body angled or not extended. I'm still doubting about the transition that you need to shift the weight to your left toe while keeping your body angled or not extended.
So I think what you're saying there is, we talk a lot about force and pressure these days. Players rotate. We see the trace going more towards their trail heel. In transition, we see this bump where they move very quickly, and it's a small movement back into their lead toe, and then they really start pouring on the rotation when they push against the ground. So that's a sequence of movement that we see how to use the ground. I think we see that with most great players.
Yeah. So let me show you this. If I take this, let's go down. Okay, imagine here's a rotating chair, right? If I want to rotate my hips, okay, as fast as I can on the downswing. So if I want to rotate my hips fast on the downswing, and I want to use the ground to help me, if I were to use my left foot to help, I would have to push from the ball of my foot, from the toe, to help push this hip backwards, right? So this is why you'll see if a player on the downswing is trying to rotate their lower body, which they are, the best way to assist this is to push the ground forward with your left foot, right? So that pressure, and we see almost 2 times the amount of pressure on the lead foot than we do on the trail foot in that transition. And it usually pushes from the ball of the foot, like you're asking here, because it helps create something called a moment or a couple, but a force couple that helps turn the hips. That is so critically important. We see this with players who are really powerful. They get that extreme push from the ball that helps, number one, helps rotate the hips, but it also, think about it, it sends them backwards so they don't really extend. Right. They actually flex more. And think about this, if you're trying to develop power, right? If you're trying to develop power, I'm trying to take this club and I'm trying to swing the club this way. So if the club is moving rapidly this way, to counterbalance that is I want to move my lower body away. If my lower body moves forward, I have to go slower, right? So that push not only helps create the force couple that turns the pelvis, it also helps generate club head speed, right? And counterbalance it, which is why that's just in basic physics, it can create more speed, right? I hope we answered your question there. Okay, Austin, for business medical track, what ways do you find effective to gain new clients? What workshops, seminar topics do you like? What advice do you have to build practice from scratch? So first of all, Austin, we do also have a Q&A for the medical track as well. So I'd encourage you to come on to that because we talk a lot about those ideas. But I'll try and turn this into something that everybody level 1 listening could help us. What advice do I have to build let's start building these teams. Right. Okay. So I always feel like, and I know we have a question, we have another question that I can lump in here too. It says, when building a new facility and program, what's the best way to get our membership of 1,600 to buy into the team atmosphere? I always feel like you should, first of all, offer team packages, right? So we used to do this when we were in DC, is if someone would come in and let's say they came into our gym, we would create a package, and the package would be like 6 sessions with Dave as golf instruction, 6 sessions with me as a manual therapist working on your body, and 6 sessions with our trainer, right? So it'd be an 18-session package, but they saw the whole team. And we would say, treat yourself like a tour player. This is what a tour player does, and we would schedule independently, but the team would communicate with each other. Now you can create, your forums that everybody can communicate with each other. And I feel like you're just setting up the learning environment, right? Now, for starting your practice from scratch, to be able to create a team, you need to go meet those people, right? So I always say, listen, as a medical practitioner, you want to go meet the fitness and the golf professionals in the area. So you're going to start looking at the Find an Expert map, find everybody's TPI certified, walk in, tell them you're a medical expert that focuses on TPI and golf, and say, I'd love to work with you as a team. Remember, a team's not just 3 people. I used to have over 80 golf professionals in a 30-mile radius that were part of my team, and I had over 300 trainers, right? And I was just like, listen, if any of your clients live in my little radius, I'd love for you to send them to me. If they live outside that, I'm assuming you're using somebody else too. If any of my people come in that live in your area, Dave, I'm going to encourage them to come to your. So I would have like 80 different packages that included different trainers, different pros, and I felt like that was what made it so easy for me to build a practice.
Yeah, I think the big one is education. I think a lot of people assume that the golfer knows what they need, and they don't. And I think that you need to have education programs. We talk about this, if you're a medical expert, come up with a talk on the lower back or power or the hip and why those are important for power. Every golfer wants more power. Not one has ever come to me and asked me to hit it shorter than they do. They all want more power. So to me, I think if you come up with these topics that I could present to my membership as a golf professional, where, hey, I've got a physical therapist or a medical expert on the hip, and today we're doing a half-hour, 40-minute talk on the lower body and why it's so important for the golf swing. Those things are invaluable, but you must come up with constant education for your members. If you don't do that, members are going to YouTube to get education today and to online resources. So you need to be providing it and sharing it with them. If you do that, then you can build programs.
Okay, question here from Mark. Best exercises to teach the non-dominant side of the body. So first of all, Mark, great question. We're always encouraging doing dominant and non-dominant side for one major reason. It develops more power, right? I mean, so literally the players that have developed speed on the non-dominant side tend to be the longest hitters in the world. Mm-hmm. So for us, that's just an obvious correlation. Now, I like doing exercises that are outside of golf, right? So instead of just giving them a left-handed golf club and having them swing, which is fine, I feel like it's easier to pick something else, and we still get the nervous system moving faster, and it works. So I like doing any of the weighted and over and underweighted throwing balls. Yeah. So we do Tom House's throwing program. Yes. If you go onto our website, if you go onto my TPI, go into the Improve Your Game, go into the TPI TV section, and go look at it was like the behind the scenes for my TPI. There's a section there where Tom House takes last year's British Open champion IK Kim through the throwing program. Watch that. Okay, that's literally, it walks you through that program. I love doing that ball throwing program. I even like doing baseball striking. We use one of those hitaways where it goes around a pole and we have them go the other direction. I think those are great in the gym too. Yep. Having a rebounder with a medicine ball, but I like the velocity ones too. You want to create speed, not just strength. You want to create speed and coordination. I like chopping and lifting both directions. Yep. Medicine ball, both directions, chopping and lifting both directions. I think that helps. But throwing and striking are my two favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I was a squash player growing up and did a lot of left-handed this way, and I think racquetball, squash, table tennis
is huge too.
Phenomenal for that.
Yeah. Okay, great question, Mark. And yet, let's see, is it important for juniors about age 6 to 13 to do a physical screen? Absolutely. So first of all, our screen is cradle to grave, right? We screen from cradle to grave. Only thing with juniors is it's not enough. We add tests. So in the juniors, we look for developmental screening as well. In our junior level 2 class, we'll walk you through the junior screen, but we want to see where they are developmentally so that we can appropriately attack them for that time in their life. Like there's certain times where flexibility is more important, certain times where strength's more important, where speed's more important, and those developmental screens help us figure that out. That's right. Right. So you're always doing the level 1 screen. Another question, looks like one that we were talking about, the pelvic rotation. Let's see. Why does disassociation seem to come so naturally in baseball or in other sports, but not in golf? I do a lot of work with baseball, and I would tell you that in baseball, I think there's an advantage because literally they're stepping, right? So when you step, it's kind of like when you do a Happy Gilmore swing, right? They tend to dissociate better, right? So there's this obvious I've got to move and disassociate and rotate the lower body. Same thing in tennis, same thing, in hockey. So there's this step. But in sports like golf, where people think the feet don't move, it's like athleticism goes out the window for some reason. They don't start that lower body. So I believe it's the step that makes the big difference.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it's that simple. Okay. All right, let's see. Jonathan. Dave did a great analysis of Adam Scott's swing, noticing the level of his ears being maintained through the swing until past impact. I've analyzed my movement, and I lose posture into impact, gaining height through the ball, early extending.
That's right.
Could you suggest a possible cause of this?
Well, Jonathan, he just mentioned it. It's probably early extension. So I would check your overhead deep squat, your pelvic tilt, things like that. Obviously, when I do the level 1 and I talk about Adam Scott maintaining his body angles, earlier we talked about the fact that you lose angles and you replace them with side bend. So it's not actually true, it's just what we see, right? So when I get in this position, and if I draw a line from the ear to the hip, hip to the knee, and knee to the ankle, when Adam rotates, he stays on that line. As he shifts and rotates, his ear still stays on that line. We know the body angles are changing, but on 2D video, it looks like they're maintaining their angles. If you're losing your angles, if your head is coming up, the first thing to look at is your tailbone coming off the early extension line. Because if you're going this way, there's no way you can keep your head or your ear on that line unless you severely bend your head down. So I would look at early extension.
So let me stay right there. Let me show you a couple of drills that you can try. I always tell people, just to get that feeling of the lower body not going forward, going backwards, a great way to think of this is Dave, set up like you're going to hit. If you take a club and put it behind Dave's right heel and his left toe, as he goes to the top of the backswing, if it feels like, imagine you're a little man standing on your right hip, and I want you to tell me, where does the little man go? If the little man follows that stick, you're probably early extending, right? It goes forward and goes this way. If I ask most tour players what that little right hip man does, it goes the other way. It goes from the right toe to the left heel. It actually goes backwards 45 degrees. I always feel like that's a great little feeling, what it feels like to maintain that. And I also think getting closer to the ball helps. Sometimes as we early extend or stand up, we get farther away because we know we're standing up, and it just perpetuates the problem.
Yeah, I would go on the website under the drills and exercise section, just put in there early extension and loss of posture, and it'll bring up all the drills and exercises that we have. There's tons of them.
Yep. Okay, so let's see. Let's try, okay, if I can't toe touch this, the problem is the hamstring, and I can pelvic tilt and maintain posture though, is this a problem for my golf swing? From Kyle. So, all right, toe touch test. He says he can't touch his toes. He says it's a hamstring problem. Just so you know, most of this is not hamstring. So usually that's not a hamstring. So I'm doubting that. And then but he said you can pelvic tilt, maintain his posture. Is this a problem with the golf swing? Just because you have a physical limitation does not mean you're going to have a golf swing problem.
Exactly.
So what I would say is it doesn't have to be a golf swing problem, but it could lead to one, right? Which is why something we want to work on. So let me just help you with making sure your diagnosis is proper, right? So let's show you something that you didn't learn in level 1. I'll show you something from our level 2 medical class that help you break out to see exactly why you can't touch your toes. So Dave, stand over here. Pretend like you're Kyle and you can't touch your toes. Okay, if you can't touch your toes, we showed you in level 1 to try left and right. I'm going to show you something different. Go ahead and have a seat. So now he's going to sit with his legs out. Now from here, he's going to try, out of the way, he's going to try and touch his toes again. Now, if you can now touch your toes, and the spine looks good, that feels really easy, but you couldn't do it standing, then to me, you don't have a hamstring problem. You have a positioning problem. You can do it when you're sitting down, but you can't do it standing. That's a stability problem. So that we would focus on weight-bearing hip stability issues, like the toe touch corrections we showed you in level 1.
That's right.
Now, if you still can't touch your toes, right? Now it's consistent. Doesn't matter if you're standing or laying down. There's something going on. So now I want to know, is this a spine problem? The spine won't flex, or is it a posterior chain, like the fascia around the hamstring or your calves? The way to figure that out is lay on your back. So now Dave's going to lay on his back, and we're going to check the hip first. Legs are all the way out. We're going to do an active straight leg raise. This comes from the functional movement screen, keeping your arms down by your side, palms up. Keep your left heel down, right knee straight, and raise your right leg up in the air. Now that's a active straight leg raise. Normal is 70 degrees. Compare right and left. Right? If you can't get to at least 70 degrees, then hey, you're probably right. There's something wrong with hip hinging, right? So it might not be spine, it might be hinged. If you've got a friend, let's say you're restricted. Pretend this one's restricted. If it's restricted, then have your friend try. Totally relax and see if your friend can do it. If your friend can do it, but you can't do it, well then you know what? It's not a mobility problem. Again, it's a stability activation problem, and I would do more stability work. If you can't do it standing, you can't do it seated, you can't do it laying down, and your friend can't do it, you've got a mobility problem, right? And then we would focus on trying to lengthen that posterior chain, whether it's the calf or over the calf area, over the hamstring area, still to be determined. I would tell you, at least 50% of the people that we see, it starts below the knee, not above the knee. Now, if the active straight leg raise is okay, well then I'm going to assume you've got a spine problem, right? It's the spine won't flex. So instead of working on the hips, I'd be working on flexing the spine, like the curl-ups we talked about before.
Yep.
Any of those spine, lower back, increasing that flexibility, and I think that'll help you a lot. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, let's see. Do you recommend obtaining professional liability insurance when offering TPI cash-paying services? That's from Craig. Craig, I always recommend having liability insurance, right? You never know. I mean, you are in a physical interaction business. This is very cheap, right? You can get up to $5 million coverage for really, really cheap on this, but I would absolutely recommend doing that.
Yep.
I think that's just a big yes. Is there a way to view the assessments on the app on a desktop computer? I find app difficult to use, post the screen. Well, okay, here's the deal. That's another loaded question. So we do have a professional website. We have a My TPI Pro site. If you've never seen that, just email Ruben at a customer service and just basically ask him for a free demo. He'll give you a month demo where you can try it out. So there is a desktop version where you can go and do it. Like I said before, the handicaps don't match yet. They will soon. In the future, just so you know, what's coming is you will be able to build post-screen all the exercise programs. Now that I don't want to give you an exact date on the app. I don't want to give the exact date when that launches, but we're really excited because it's on our beta version right now on our phones. But sometime, hopefully by the end of the year, you'll be able to take these steps from the screen and actually build them exercises like you could do on the desktop version right now. But there is a desktop version. Just email Ruben at customer service and he'll get you month trial that. How soon or long will results happen for my golf clients? You know, this is a question I hear all the time, Sarah. It's like, if I start working out, how long is it going to take for me to feel better? I always tell my clients, if you don't notice a difference today, either I can't fix you or we did the wrong thing.
Right.
And most people feel a difference today. So do not say it's going to take 12 months or 6 months. That's total BS, right? I think you should be able to make an impact today. If you don't, you need to get more information out there.
That's like in level 1 when we do the toe touch correction, we can fix it right away just by creating a different motor pattern. You know, I think you should be able to do it immediately.
There's another question from Mark. I know TPI is swing method agnostic. In other words, we don't really have a technique that we abide to. But any comments from body movement perspective, if the body should follow the swinging of the arms or vice versa? So
that's a little bit of a well, there's methods, right? So there's guys that talk about the club should move first and it should be the swinging of the club. Well, I've always thought of it as this, is that the minute you pick up that club, the body's involved. So the club isn't going to move by itself. So when someone says to me that the body responds to the swinging of the club, well, the body is already moving the club. So in many ways, to me, I always look at the body first and what starts the swing.
Yep.
But again, there's lots of swing methods. And a lot of swing methods are actual feels. The feeling, it's not what's actually happening. That's the beauty of 3D. When someone says, well, I just swing the club, well, we can see what starts it.
Right.
And it's usually a motion from the ground that starts
I'm gonna say this, you know, from the biomechanics standpoint, right? There's no question, there's no good player that the arms start, right? So the lower body starts from now. I think you're asking a feel question.
I think
right.
So.
The feel question, a lot of great players feel like their arms are doing it, but the lower body is the base of which that's accelerating around. So I think the better question is not what's really happening, what does it feel like? And I think you need to experiment.
That's right. And listen, there's been amazing instructors like Manuel Elatorre, who was an incredible instructor that talked about the swinging of the club and the body responds to it. Again, that's more of a feel. If you actually looked at that, the minute you move the club, it's usually coming from a push from the ground. So the body is working.
We had that conversation with Zach Johnson, with Mike Bender. Those arms, and you look at the kinematic sequence, it's perfect.
It is.
Right? So it's like the lower body. So again, I think there's lots of ways to skin a cat. But from a biomechanical standpoint, it starts from the ground. From a feel standpoint, you gotta experiment and try.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's go to, does your center of gravity move during the swing, or should your center of gravity stay between your feet throughout the whole swing? So again, from a biomechanical standpoint, if you want to create power, it's this movement from the center of gravity and center of mass that helps create this weight shift and creates these force couples. So I'm going to tell you, we want to move. And I'm speaking from a power perspective. Now, there is an argument to say from an accuracy perspective, the less things that are moving, the less variables, you're more accurate. I'm just looking at what creates more money on the PGA Tour right now, and it's power, not accuracy. I mean, if I look at the players who win accuracy, long drive accuracy, most of them lose their tour cards.
That's right.
The guys that win the long driving ones are the top 10 in the world, right? So if you're looking for power, we want to get things moving. If you're looking for accuracy, you want to minimize movement. That's how I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the world's longest drivers, they're moving big time. They're using their legs, they're jumping, they're doing things that you don't see on tour. The reason is on tour, a lot of these guys are actually just trying to hit it in place, so they're starting to stabilize a little bit more.
Yep. Okay. This is from Mr. Scott. Spent morning with Lance and Dave about a month ago. I was just wondering if there's any aspect of the training that most contributes to making a golf swing consistent. You know, so from a golf training perspective, obviously there's going to be mobility parts, there's going to be stability parts, there's going to be power parts. What makes the golf swing more consistent? Well, it depends on what your problem is.
It is.
Right? If you're a mobility person, then it's mobility. If you're a weak, it's stability and strength. So based on your screening, I think the first thing you always ask yourself, am I a mobility primary person or am I a strength stability primary person, right? And if it's mobility, nothing else matters. If you can't move in the positions, you're going to be inconsistent. You're adding lateral variables and front and back variables that you don't want. If your mobility is pretty good, but you just don't use the right muscles, you don't have the strength stabilized, then you're a stability.
Yeah, and I would say one thing on the golf swing perspective there is that I'm still amazed at how few amateurs know the difference between the setup position and the impact position, right? So setup, impact position with the shaft leaning forward and the weight firmly pushing against the ground this way. That needs to be taught more, especially with beginning golfers and players that are inconsistent, because a lot of them have no idea, and you need to make sure that they understand the difference between the two and just get them to that impact position. They can usually be more consistent.
Oh, this one comes from Morton. When doing a posture test, I find it difficult to be sure if the person is in neutral or S posture. Okay, this is a great question because a lot of times you can't tell, but here's how you tell. If you're like, I can't tell. Is that just big glutes in their shirt or that S posture? Well, that's why we have 2 other tests. So the first thing you do is you look at their posture. Then you have them do the pelvic tilt test.
Right.
If they look like they're in S posture, then you say, go ahead and arch your back, and they can still do it more, then that's actually they're neutral, and they're okay. If they can't do the pelvic tilt test, it's probably your first sign that, okay, they're probably in S posture. Second test is the bridge test. Remember, the bridge is looking to see, can they activate their glutes and their abdominals? If somebody's already in an S posture, usually it deactivates the glutes and the abdominals.
That's right.
So if the bridge test is difficult and they can't do the pelvic tilt, you're probably confident now it's an S posture. If they can do both of those, I'd say they're probably neutral.
Yeah, and if they can do both of those, but it's looking more C, then try the toe touch test, because that's probably affecting the C posture.
And Jonathan, as a college strength coach, what can I add to my golfers' pre-round routine to most benefit them for their round? Great question, Jonathan. We get this all the time. What's the best pre-rounds, routine? Again, it depends on you, right? So basically, you take their screen and you identify the problem. So you always put their problems in their pre-warm-up. But two important things. Number one, most research has shown if you do a lot of static hold stretching, sometimes they can get into range of motions that they're not used to, and it's hard for them to coordinate those. So I don't like to do a lot of heavy stretching before the round. I do more dynamic, active warm-up, right? So trying to make the joints move that you want them to move during the swing, but do it dynamically. And then I like activation. Instead of mobility, I like stability. So I like to activate the muscles, get the glutes firing, get the core firing, doing some, with bands, some light bands, some chopping, some lifting, some pushing, some pulling, all those things to activate the muscles, kind of get the blood going, get a little heat in the body, and then we're off and going.
Go from there,
right? Make sure you focus on everything. I think we got one last one, right? We got one
I
last.
say this last one for Mark. It's kind of it's 2 questions.
Okay, this is the biggest surprise one?
Yeah.
Biggest surprise, okay, from Mark. Biggest surprise to my clients is no strength tests in a level 1 screen. What role does physical strength play in? Okay, great question. So what, Mark, you're asking like, hey, how come this isn't in a level 1 test? Man, where do I start, right? So there's no power testing in level 1, right? There's no cardiovascular testing in level 1. There's definitely no strength testing in level 1. There's no vision testing in level 1. I can go on for an hour of all the things that we just don't have time to cover in level 1. So level 1 is just your basic platform of mobility and stability. If you're interested on the screening that we do for kids, all the developmental screening, that's in our junior level 2 class. And remember, all our level 2s are online except for power. The fitness class, we start out with teaching you our fitness evaluation. We literally start out with 4 power tests that we do with every player. And if the power tests are down, well, power is a combination of strength and speed. So if power is down, we have to figure out, is it a strength problem or a speed problem? So we go into our strength testing. We do strength testing for the legs. We do strength testing for pushing and pulling. And then we also do grip strength testing with the dynamometer. So all of that testing is in level 2. And the reason it's in level 2 is because everybody sitting in the level 1 isn't a trainer. We have golf professionals, we have medical professionals, we have fitness professionals. We want everybody to understand the language of communicating with each other, identifying characteristics in their body that might be affecting their swing, and then we divide you up into your professions. And in the fitness one, like level 1, you haven't learned our fitness evaluation. That's level 2 fitness. Level 1, you haven't learned our medical exam. That's our medical level 2. Like level 1 screen is 15 tests. Level 2 medical screen is 82 assessments, right? I mean, it's a whole different ballgame. So hopefully that makes sense. And I think we got, looks like we got one more. We'll do one more. We'll go over. Glenn, perfect postures, as Adam Scott seems to be the flavor here in Australia now. However, there's a school of thought that the more relaxed setups of yesteryear, Snead, Hogan, were safer on the body. What's your thoughts?
Well, that's a good one. I mean, we are seeing a lot more and a lot more talk. To me, those are swing styles and methods. They'll work with some. They won't work with everybody. I would say that, we have seen some guys trying to be a little bit more C and a little bit more relaxed. Some players need those. Is there any one way? I mean, we talk about in level 1, 3 basic postures, neutral, S, and C, but we see other postures as well. We talk about this a little bit more in our level 2 classes. Is one
I'll tell you, the way I'd answer is really simple. I don't think you should have to try and do anything in your golf swing. So if you have to stand there, pull your shoulder blades back, and stand up tall, you're doing something that's really not a golf swing, right? You're trying to do a posture. That's where training comes in. If you're training in the gym to get a better posture, it should just show up when you're playing. If you have to actually activate and think of this, I think you're thinking of the wrong thing. And I'd rather you be totally relaxed, and I'd rather you practice in the gym, and hopefully it transfers to your golf swing. That's my personal opinion. Now, if it's so bad that you're C posture and now it's affecting your rotation, well, then maybe we can intervene and do a couple things. But I I don't like them to think of anything like that when they're playing golf. I think there's too many things for them to think about. The last thing they should be thinking about is that.
It's funny too, because everybody likes to go back to yesteryear, and you look at Snead and Hogan and those guys. You know, Hogan's body changed a lot. He had a bad car accident, and Snead was injured quite a bit.
But he was so flexible. Both of them so flexible.
Very flexible, and they got away with a lot because of that.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, hey, we really appreciate you spending the hour with us. We're always looking for feedback on these. If there's anything that can help these get better, please let us know. We appreciate you from logging in all over the world. We will be announcing more of these. We'll probably be doing these a lot, maybe 6 of these a year. And if you guys want more, you just say the word. It's very easy for us to do this. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you guys at a level 3 or at the World Golf Fitness Summit. Remember, it's October 12th through the 14th in Orlando. It's literally our favorite 3 days every 2 years. For level 1s, it's $199. Level 2, it's $99. Level 3, it's free. So hopefully we'll see you guys there.
Thanks a lot, guys.
And level 3s have been posted, by the way, if you're interested in the level 3s. See you guys.